The term soulless gets tossed around a ton these days. And with the amount of games that are coming out every year, it's hard not to feel that way sometimes. It is a daunting task trying to make your game stand out and feel unique instead of just FPS of the year. I feel like FPS games as a genre easily suffers the most from this same game syndrome. Honestly, if you showed me any Call of Duty between the year of 2015 and now and asked me to differentiate it, I don't think I could do it. And to prove my point, I'm gonna make you do it. So here is game A. Take it in. I'll give you 10 seconds. All right, now here's game B. Again, 10 seconds. Take your time, figure it out. Maybe you grew up with it, maybe you didn't. 3, 2, 1. Alright, I might have tricked you. The first game is Call of Duty World War II, but the second game is actually Battlefield 1. Now, if you're a big fan of this genre, you might be looking at me like I'm stupid, but I think it does a decent job of explaining how similar these games actually feel when you look at them. I'm not sure if it's the color palettes they chose, the environments, or the stories they tell, but all of these games feel the same to me. Although it's hard, it is certainly not impossible. BioShock is one of the best examples of a game with tons of personality. It's an overall very dark game in terms of its themes, its world, and its storytelling. It takes place in Rapture, which is like an underwater dystopian version of Manhattan in the 60s, and it makes for one of the most interesting areas I've seen in a first-person shooter. Being so deep underwater, there's obviously no sunlight, so everything is lit up by neon lights and flashy colors, which makes the areas feel really artificial, like they're always trying to sell you on the idea that this place is happy and fun. And when it's not, it's dark, dirty, grimy, blood's on the walls and in the corners. It feels really uncomfortable to be around. Both of these environments mix Rapture to make it what it is, and it's one of the best examples of world building in an FPS game and in gaming entirely. Nintendo, among other things, is known for their unique, innovative experiences and spins on genres. Except when they don't. I love New Super Mario Bros., but I can understand it's only because I grew up with this game. To be honest, for a lot of people, it was nice to just be able to play a new 2D Mario game. Before this, it had been a decade since the last one, so any return to form was a welcomed one. Looking back on it now, I think we can all realize this game didn't do a ton, but it did just enough to feel like a new experience. 3 years later, we got New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and I had a huge emphasis on 4-player co-op, which was a really big deal for the time. Before this game, multiplayer Mario Bros. Wasn't really multiplayer. It was switching off from one player to another when one game overed. It brought back the Koopalings, which was really nice to see. It introduced a couple new power-ups, but realistically, it didn't innovate that much. As early as New Super Mario Bros. Wii, we can begin to see the New Super Mario Bros. Formula. Grass level, desert level, beach level, forest level, ice level, mountain level, sky level, lava level, rainbow road. Having these games come out so recently between each other, it was well liked, but it was obvious we were ready for something new. And that is surely something we did not get. As someone who was 11 years old when this game came out and loves pretty much everything that's thrown at you, even I was confused about New Super Mario Bros. 2. First of all, it's the third one, so the name is already stupid. The coin gimmick was one of the most poorly made attempts to innovate, and I'm not even sure you can call it an innovation. I don't think anyone was playing a Mario Brothers game for the coins. And to make the entire aesthetic and campaign around collecting coins when, to be honest, even in this game, they do nothing, is bizarre. And the only new power-ups that were brought to the table here were the coin ones, which no one really cared about in the first place. Sure, they brought back the Tanuki Leaf and the Reznors for some reason, but it honestly just felt like a lot of nostalgia bait at this point. This game is the perfect example of how uninspired and bland the new Super Mario Bros. Games really felt. When New Super Mario Bros. U came out later that year, doing very little to innovate, I think a lot of people grew a displeasure for this series. These games built a legacy of being formulaic, heartless, uninspired platformers that don't really do anything to change up the games. They all look very similar to one another. They all sound very similar to one another. None of these games have their own identity, and they all just kind of blend together in one big pile of new. This formulaic approach also had a really big impact on the Mega Man series. When the first Mega Man game came out, it was nothing like anyone had ever seen before. Being able to take other bosses' powers and use those powers against other bosses for easier fights was an insanely innovative thing for the time. And being able to use boss powers outside in other stages, it was absolutely incredible. And the same goes for Mega Man 2. They added a ton of things to keep this fresh. This is the first game with a Wily stage, a difficulty setting, a password system, and a bunch of other changes that make it a little bit more different from Mega Man 1. Mega Man 3 came out 2 years after Mega Man 2 and it introduced a new anti-hero called Proto Man. It introduced a slide and rush, but after this game, things start to go downhill. Mega Man 4 came out barely a year later and it introduced the Charge Shot and Dr. Cossack, which was a switcheroo for Dr. Wily, and it would get really old after this game. At this point, people were starting to get burnt out on Mega Man, and it really shows for the reviews for this time. In a brave move by Capcom, they decided to release 4 new Mega Man games in the span of 5 years. This also doesn't include the Mega Man X series, which had about 3 entries on the SNES. Mega Man was beaten and shucked dry of its formula to the point where people were tired of Mega Man. And just because you have a good formula, it's only going to take you so far. Art direction and art style take a game really, really far. In the case of Mega Man, outside of 7, 8, and 11, all of these games look nearly identical to me. If you ask me to pick out which bosses from which game towards the latter half of the series, I don't think I could do it. And when the art styles of your games are able to mix so well with one another, it's hard to decipher which one is which. They all lack their own personality and identity. Okami's visuals live inside my head rent-free all the time. From the minute you power this game on, you know you're in for something special. The Japanese inkbrush Sumi-e art style does this game wonders, and it really helps it stand the test of time. When people use the insult, "This looks like a PS2 game," Okami makes that look like a compliment. This game looks so good. The little details really add so much to this game. Lots of aesthetic decisions, like when Ami runs around, her being the goddess of sun, she breathes life back into the earth that's been sucked dry of it. Lots of the different weapons she has access to throughout the game are references to actual Japanese historical weapons. It really feels like every single minute detail and side quest in this game is some reference to Japanese myth or folklore. There are tons, and I mean tons, of different examples of this throughout the main story and the side quests. And this game just becomes this big love letter to Japanese history. I could talk about this game for hours on end, but what's important is that all of this is what builds Okami's personality and identity. Remakes are absolutely inevitable these days, and they can either revitalize and rejuvenate that original personality the game had, or it could be Majora's Mask 3D. When they remade Ocarina of Time, they knew they had to take a faithful approach because at its core, this game does not need to be changed. Its personality and prestige are things that didn't need to be changed. All it needed was a fresh coat of paint and some quality of life updates, and that's all it got, and it was an amazing port for that. Majora's Mask was not given that same treatment. Eiji Aonuma said before that he was very unhappy during the development of Majora's Mask, and that if he could remake it, he would change a lot. And they sure fucking did. Everyone has said it before, but Majora's Mask is a very dark game. It's the end of the world, and the environment matches those feelings so perfectly. They blend together and they make Majora's Mask as great as it is. A decent portion of this was lost in translation when they were doing the remake. It feels like someone came in and mopped and swept every corner of this game and they cleaned it up, and it loses some of that depressing personality it has in the environment, so they don't blend as well together with the themes. They streamlined every single boss, and the biggest offense of them all, the form changes. My favorite part of Majora's Mask is the ability to change forms and how unique each of these forms feel. The Goron, the Zora, and the Deku all have things that make them unique, and it makes you want to keep using them throughout the end of the game. It is one of the coolest gimmicks in the series, and they did a lot of things in the remake to suck some of the personality out of these. The biggest change, the Zora swimming, is absolutely the most disappointing to me. The original Zora swimming really put you in the shoes of a Zora. It's fast, responsive, and at first you're gonna bounce into stuff. You're not gonna be very good at it, and that's some of the charm. Once you get really good at it, you feel like a Zora. You can just barely edge yourself out of the water going super, super fast. It gives you a lot of control and response. And what did they change that into the remake? You feel like any other swimming game, and it makes it immediately less fun. Yes, the old swimming does exist, but it now costs a resource, so you're less likely to use it all the time like you could in the original. A big chunk of the Zora's personality is its swimming, and when you make changes like these, it trivializes the experience of becoming a Zora. To a less egregious extent, the Deku movement on Leafs is the same thing. It was better than the original. It doesn't really change the experience of being a Deku too much other than being slower, but it doesn't make sense as a change to me. I am someone who absolutely loves Majora's Mask, but I still think this is the definitive way for 99% of people to enjoy this game. I just wish it kept some of the personality that the original had. I did a lot more complaining than I usually do in my videos, but I think it's important to highlight why personality matters in video games and how it adds to the overall experience. A game can have the best gameplay and story of all time, but if it's told in a bland, boring, uninspired way, it's going to be forgetful and nothing more than mediocre. The true message behind this video is to play Okami because it deserves all the love it gets and then some. Okay, bye. And you don't seem to